Peace, family. It's your brother Marc Lamont Hill shouting y'all out here at the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. Want to hear from y'all today. Want to break some stuff down, but let me know where you're coming from before I start breaking down this brief live. So write in the comments where you're coming in from. Let me know the city. Let me know the state. Let me know exactly where you're coming from. If you're not coming in from the United States, let me know what country you're coming in from, including Africa. I know some of y'all get mad when I say Africa, but don't get mad. I'm about to break some stuff down for y'all, family. But I want to make sure that y'all have context. I want to be very, very clear about this breakdown because the last couple of days I've been getting just bum rushed online by people who identify as ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, as well as people who identify as FBA, Foundational Black Americans. Let me start with a very basic claim, a very basic premise, okay? I don't have beef with FBA or ADOS. I'm not looking for no beef. I ain't got no beef. I ain't got no beef with your founders, your creators, the people who coined those terms. I ain't got no personal or political beef with any of them. So this is not me trying to start some shit. This is me trying to clarify a point, but also give some insight into why potentially people might be upset, and why I might disagree with why some folk are upset, and while I might affirm other reasons why people are upset. Let me get right to it because I don't want to waste a whole lot of time because I ain't got a whole lot of time. First of all, about, I want to say a week ago, or earlier this week actually, I responded in a video to Cameron. Shout out to Cameron, my dear brother, who on his talk show made a statement that he prefers to identify as Black rather than African American. And he gave his reason. His reason was that feels more accurate for him. It feels more appropriate for him. It's based on how he sees himself, how the world sees him, and also most fundamentally, from what I heard in this interview, and I've spoken to Cam since just via online, and he says that I might have missed part of what he said. I watched the whole exchange, though. I don't know what I missed, but I'm open to the possibility that I missed something. I ain't perfect. But what he said, but ultimately, the thing that I took away was that he also said that Africans don't see us as authentically African, that they don't see us as African. And I responded. I responded to Cam. I wrote, I made a video. I broke down, and you can see the video online. You can see the video right here on the channel. It says Marc Lamont Hill, I think, or Cameron receives clapback from Marc Lamont Hill. It wasn't really a clapback, as Cam said. He didn't clap at me. So it was much more of just a intellectual disagreement between brothers, as we should be able to have. The internet encourages, certain kinds of language for the algorithm. You got to say you clap back, or you got to say somebody gets responded to in caps. So you got to say somebody gets dragged, just in order to get people to watch the video. But it wasn't nothing like that. Cam is a dope brother who I love and admire and appreciate. I just had a slightly different take. What was my take? My take was, we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. In other words, I don't have a problem identifying as Black. I do identify as Black. If you ask me on any day of the week, what are you? I'm going to say I'm Black. I might say Black American in the context of distinguishing myself from another country. I might say I'm a Black American for a very particular political purpose, or a very particular analytic purpose. In other words, I may say I'm a Black American for the purpose of making clear that I'm not from France, or that I'm not from Germany, or wherever else. But for me, fundamentally, Black is my identifier, and I am a Black American. I have no issue with that. Ironically, I think the people who are giving me the most smoke about this issue are people who I probably agree with on most of the points they would make and that they have made around this. I ain't got no problem with that. I got no problem with that. But I'm pulling up my Twitter because I want y'all to see some of the ridiculousness that I've been dealing with. So that was that. I said that we don't need to throw away our African Americanness or our connection to Africa, even as we embrace a Black identity. Let me say more. For me, Black is my identifier. African American to me is divisive. Because when I'm in the United States, I feel a power and a connection to all people who look like me. And I believe in a national or a Black collective identity, right? So in other words, I struggle with my brothers from Cuba who are Afro-Cuban. I struggle with my brothers who are Haitian. I struggle with my brothers from the continent of Africa. I struggle with my brothers who are in Jordan. And I think the thing that binds us together in this political climate, in this juncture in history, is this idea of Blackness. When we experience racism, we're often experiencing, it's rooted in a form of anti-Blackness. White supremacy hinges upon anti-Blackness. And so the anti-Blackness that we're experiencing is shared not just by people who are here, who are African American by citizenship, by birth, by whatever, but it's also experienced by the Nigerian cab driver here. That's why I use the police example. The police don't care whether that person's from Nigeria or from Uganda or from Haiti or from Guyana or from Houston. It's our Blackness that consigns us to second-class citizenship here. It's our Blackness that makes people see us as less beautiful, less smart, less talented, more dangerous, etc., less moral. That's what a white supremacist context does. And so I absolutely hold on to my identity as Black as a way of connecting me to all these other people. When I say African American, to me, it's making me distinct from other Black folk in the States. It also makes me distinct from people around the diaspora. Now, for the people who identify as FBA and ADOS who have reached out to me, a lot of them have said, well, we don't want to see ourselves in a Pan-African framework. I understand that. I'm not imposing a Pan-African framework. I'm simply saying that for me, my method of political identification is not restricted to the borders of the United States. In other words, I am doing two things at once. On the one hand, I am recognizing that I am a Black American with our own tradition and our own history and our own experience, right? A Black American who's a descendant of slavery. That's one thing, right? What some people call ADOS, what some people call FBA, whatever. I'm saying that there is a specific cultural history, ethnic identity, national identity, whatever you want to say, that has emerged around people who are descendants of slavery in the United States. There is a particular justice request. There's a particular justice claim being asserted by people who identify as the descendants of American slavery. That is reparations. I support reparations. I support reparations for the descendants of American slavery. Full stop. So I'm not denying any of that. But many of you online were coming at me as if I was saying I don't recognize or respect the legitimate uniqueness and power of Black American identity, specifically rooted in the tradition of slavery or the institution of slavery and those people who emerged out of it. I'm not denying that. I hold on to that. Again, I support reparations for descendants of slavery. I support reparations for that. I also recognize a distinct cultural tradition that emerges out of what Black folk have done here in the United States because of slavery. Yes, prior to slavery, we had different ethnic identities and different cultural traditions because we were different tribes, and not even the nation state wasn't formed yet, but we were part of different tribes and different civilizations, and different cultures. So yeah, but when you come here, the institution of slavery scrambled all of that. The institution of slavery forced us into a new national formation. These are all social constructs. And now Black Americans in the United States have their own culture. We have our own traditions, our own civilization, our own language, our own patterns and functions, and our own demands. Again, our own justice claims. I don't deny none of that. What I was saying to the brother Cameron, and what I was saying to other people online, is that holding on to that Black American identity, or even the Black descendant of slavery identity, does not compete with, is not at odds with, is not in contradiction with also recognizing our relationship to Africa. I wasn't saying that we all have to walk around saying, I'm African. I'm not demanding Pan-Africanness from anybody. Now, I happen to believe there's value in what we call strategic essentialism. There's value in identifying and aligning ourselves with African people around the globe. But Africa itself is a political construct. It's a social construct, right? It's not like 500 years ago, people were identifying as African. They weren't even identifying as a nation. In terms of the nation state, they're identifying as their tribe, as their clan, as their local and collective identity. So all these identities are things we construct. So I ain't mad at that. I'm only saying that as Black Americans, part of the legacy of white supremacy, part of the legacy of those institutions that produced the ADOS and FBA identity, that is slavery, those institutions also imposed white superiority. They also imposed white supremacy. They also taught us that we had a history that begins and ends with slavery. So my point is to say that you can choose Black over African American. Like I said, I do too. But I don't deny the devil's in the details. The tension is in the reason. My issue is that my decision to identify as Black is to bind me to more Black folk, not fewer. But even if you don't believe that, and even if you decide to singularly hold on to the descendant of slavery identity, that's fine. But that doesn't mean that we have to then decide that Africa has nothing to offer us as a site of historical reference. And I haven't heard the leaders of ADOS or the other organizations say anything to the contrary. I'm not trying to make a straw man here. But many of the people online who were hitting me up were acting like, why are you mentioning Africa? So I'm not talking about Yvette Carnell, but I'm saying many people were like, why are you mentioning Africa? And many of them began to use the language of white supremacy and the tropes of xenophobia. They began to paint ugly narratives of Africa. They began to engage in practices that I think are simply anti-Black, regardless of where you're from. So again, you can say, I choose Black identity and I choose to construct an ethnic identity rooted in my identity as a Black descendant of slavery in the United States. Cool. I ain't mad at that. I don't disagree with that. Again, I don't disagree with that. No matter how many times online y'all say that I do. But I also think Africa has something to teach us. I think Africa is our history and it's our culture also. It's rooted in that. So if I'm going to study the Black church, which is an institution that emerges out of slavery, right, in terms of how we move, I can't disconnect that from cultural tropes and cultural traditions and systems of water emergence, of call and response that come out of Africa. I can't talk about hip hop, which is the creation of foundational Black Americans. I can't talk about hip hop without talking about polyrhythms and mixing and pastiche and signifying, which is coming out of the Eshua Legba in West Africa. I'm saying we ain't got to ignore the connections. We ain't got to ignore the relationships. That doesn't make us more or less real. And finally, if white supremacy has taught us that the foundational Black American or the American descendant of slavery is inferior intellectually, culturally, morally, etc. Part of what tying back to Africa does is it reminds us of the great history and civilization and patterns we had that preceded slavery. Our history was not started with slavery. It was shifted with slavery. It was reorganized with slavery. It was disrupted by slavery, but it wasn't rooted in slavery. Even if the formation of this particular ethnic identity is grounded in that. Jerry Rayon, my neighbor, my love, my family. Good to see you. Good to see you, my sister. So we got to think about that. But as soon as, and this is the last thing I'll say before I go, as soon as I started to offer my perspective, then they start coming with the, well, you can't tell us how to identify. You can't tell us how to identify. And I'm like, who is the you and who is the us? I am a Black American. I am a descendant of slavery. And somehow it's becoming Mark the outsider trying to tell ADOS or FBA how to identify. That you have a right to self-determination. I'm undermining your right to self-determination. Let me say this very clearly, because a lot of the anger came from that. I am not an outsider telling you how to identify. I am an insider making my own decisions about how I identify and pushing back against other claims. As an American descendant of slavery myself, as a foundational Black American myself. Again, for the last time, I am not an outsider doing this. I am an insider doing this. But I'm getting hit with the most ugly xenophobic language and ugly xenophobic tropes. I'm gonna show you one of them just for context. But you can look into a Google search. This isn't an outlier. This is one of a gajillion, to use a technical term. If you look here, somebody said to me, and again, I literally probably got 1,000 of these. I'm not even exaggerating. Maybe thousands. My timeline was in shambles for the last 3 days. Because people kept saying I wasn't a Black American. So I'm like, what are y'all talking about? So even here, right? You are not a Black American. You are not us, right? Because again, erasure is real. Don't listen to these Pan-Africanists tell you. Marc Lamont Hill, this is for you since you wanted to shout us down and tell us who we are. Again, shout us down, tell us who we are. Us versus them narrative that makes it me the outsider and them the insider. And then they name all these prominent Black people who aren't ADOS, right? And I get it. So I say, why do you get to say who we are and I don't? And they say, you are not Black American, you are not us. So now I'm like, what? So I say, look, y'all do this every few months. I am Black American, you don't get to decide that I'm not. So then they say, you can't be Black American as you don't have ancestors that toiled, built, developed, or advanced this nation. You are an immigrant, AKA anchor baby. And this is where I get frustrated. Because now, one, it's not true, right? I am not a quote unquote anchor baby. But the language of anchor baby is xenophobic and it's harmful. And it's the white nationalist rhetoric that's used to talk about immigrants who come to the United States. This country is a white supremacist empire. And I find it striking that so many people want to fly American flags and buy into this empire and even deploy the language, the exclusionary language of an imperial nation state. You can be Black American and foundational American and Black American and say, I'm a descendant of this thing. I built this thing. This is ours. We have a justice claim here without pretending that America isn't an evil empire. But instead, you're an immigrant. You're an anchor baby. They're deploying all this xenophobic, ugly language to divide us. And I'm saying it's problematic even if I am an anchor baby. But guess what? I'm actually not. As I wrote here, my great-grandparents were enslaved right here in the US, as were their parents. The only thing worse than the lie is the fact that y'all appropriate this disgusting xenophobic language. And then, of course, where's your great-grandparents from and were they sharecroppers? We don't believe you. So basically, nothing that I say, and I could say, look, they're from Georgia, etc. And they say, there it is. Black Americans aren't xenophobic. We've helped and supported all these disrespectful immigrants participating in our sorry, my mic went off. In our subjugation and oppression via structural violence. Talk to me about what do to Black Americans instead of you uplifting others. I ain't uplifting others. I'm saying as a Black American, this is what I'm committed to. I'm committed to the project of Black liberation, Black freedom. That's why I support reparations. But now it becomes a witch hunt. Who's a secret immigrant and who's not? Who's a foundational and who's not? But I'm gonna say it one more time, and I'm gonna say it for the last time. I am the descendant of Leon Hill, who is the descendant of L.M. Hill, who was born 100 years before I was born. His father was enslaved in Georgia. And in fact, my family still lives near the plantation on which they were forced to work in Washington, Georgia, in Wilkes County, Georgia. My mother is from Farmville, Virginia, like Lady of Rage. So, and her great-grandparents were enslaved Africans. I made a joke a long time ago about being Jamaican Croatian, and now they keep running around acting as if I'm really from Croatia. Do I look like I'm from Croatia? Do I look like I'm from Jamaica? Or maybe Jamaica just from complexion, but I ain't even been to Jamaica. I don't know no Jamaicans. I don't even have Jamaican in-laws, Jamaican second cousins, Jamaican married cousins, nothing. Just Black Negroes, slavery. That's it. That's it. That's it. So knock it off. All the anger and the vitriol, people start talking about my mama and where she's from. People start bringing up my blood clots when I almost died. I mean, it's such a vicious space. And for what? We all on the same team here, family. We all struggling for reparations. When I say all, I don't mean every Black person on the same team. I mean me. I'm on the same team as y'all struggling for reparations and justice. So why don't we cool down the violence, rhetorical violence? Why don't we chill on the insults? And why don't we actually build and work toward getting what we deserve, which is having our justice claim affirmed through reparations? All right, family, hit the like button if you feel me. If not, that's cool. You don't have to. Hit the subscribe button if you want to be a part of this channel. And of course, hit the join button if you're so inclined. And finally, if you want to donate directly to the channel, go to MLH TV on Cash App, and you can help build this thing yourself from the ground up. I'll see y'all later. Peace.